Welcome back, everybody. Brian Schwager here to talk about poor posture and its effect on organs and your organ function. In part one, we just talked about why ideal posture is important. Remember, the second leading cause to injury are muscle imbalance syndromes, and when you have postural imbalances, you have muscle imbalances, which can lead to injury. However, did you know that poor posture also affects how your organs function? All right, so sit on the edge of your seat, grab a pen and paper, and let me take you on a little journey down to the inside of your body. All right, here we go. All right, so you ready? Of course, we're going to start by reviewing the four principles. Remember, the four pillars to the business, no matter if I'm working with somebody in chronic pain, a high-performance athlete or professional athlete, I'm always going to use the four pillars to help restore and enhance their performance. Restore them or enhance their performance. And also remember that the little image in the middle, the human anatomy image, represents that you don't have a particular joint or muscle problem, you have a body problem. All of these areas interconnect. They all end up showing and manifesting themselves in the physical form. The physical manifestation is only part of the picture. As you're going to learn today, your posture, if I'm looking at your physical health and how you move, and I'm looking at your posture and it's distorted, I'm also going to look at your scores, because I rate and rank each one of these to basically determine whether you're moving towards or away from wellness. So to illustrate this point about the four principles and how all systems are integrated in the body, we're going to use this creative and clever illustration with permission from the Czech Institute to learn how muscles and organs communicate with the brain via the spinal cord. So here's your spine, and deep inside is your spinal cord, which is a information channel between the brain, muscles, organ functions, and various systems of the body. In fact, in each segment of the spine, there are reflex pathways. And the segments of your spine are like the keys of a piano. There, in this illustration, you can see that here in 1 and 2, up towards the top of the spine, there are reflex pathways for the heart and lung. We go a little bit lower into the spinal column, and then there are reflex pathways for all these visceral organs: stomach, small intestine, pancreas, liver, and colon. And then as we go down the spine, we have reflex pathways to the other organs. Now this is very interesting because messages are sent down the spinal cord via the reflex pathway to the associated organ. But also, if there's an organ dysfunction, the information goes backwards through the spinal cord and back up to the brain. Now there can be disruptions at these segments. So if I hit a key on this piano and it doesn't play the note, then there's a disruption between the key and the chord. So these little yellow lines out here represents the chord for each of these keys on the piano. And if the key is not working, then we're not going to get any sound. Or if the key is off, maybe it has a disruption, the sound isn't, the note, the tone is out of tune. So it's the same thing with the spinal system. When the spine is out of alignment due to poor posture, it affects these reflex pathways and causes problems. So here again is the organs themselves. So you have the lungs, the heart, the pancreas, liver, gallbladder, and intestines, etc., etc. In this visceral sac, so you see that here, and over, that lies over it like a sheath of muscles, which they are your abdominal muscles. And you have layers of abdominal muscles. So inside, we have these deep abdominal muscles to provide segmental stability to the spine. In this illustration down here, we have the visceral section, which is where all your organs are held. So you see how the muscles wrap around, they wrap around this viscera, and then you see here where we have the brain, the spinal cord, and then we have the little nerves that innervate each organ. In this case, we're talking about digestion. So when there's a digestive disturbance, there's a lot of energy there, and like a circuit breaker in a house, when you plug too many things into a light socket, it trips the fuse. Well, in the human body, what the brain does is, rather than creating huge disturbances to the, in this case, the digestive or the stomach, so what the brain does is it disperses the energy into the tissues around the organs. So the tissues around the organs. So here is the inner abdominal area. So here's your outer core. And then we peel back the layers and we see the inner core. What happens here is, when there is disruption in the organ, the brain will flood the tissues with energy. And I'm using my own terms here, ladies and gentlemen. And it will trip a fuse in the body. So in other words, the muscles get inhibited. These deep muscles here are what are known as phasic muscles. And their primary job is to stabilize. And when they're inhibited, they don't act as stabilizers no longer. They don't even have a job, because we call that sensory motor amnesia. Now, if we don't have any spine stability, what's the brain going to do? It's going to scramble, and it's going to ask for help from other muscles, maybe the hips. So it'll create what they call a tonic response. There are certain muscles that are prone to getting tight. Your psoas is one of them, your hip flexors. And your piriformis muscle, which is deep underneath the gluteal muscle. And even some muscles in the upper back. Now, I find this all the time when I have a client who has postural dysfunction. Certain muscles are short and tight, certain muscles are long and weak, as I explained in part 1. Now, this is vitally important, because here is this same client. They're not getting better. They finally come here, and I find out they got a digestive problem. And that was the whole cause to their low back pain. This is just an example. This isn't for everybody. That's why everybody has to be assessed, and there should be a comprehensive consultation. But you see where I'm going with this? We have the 4 principles, so all 4 of those principles interrelate to the human body. Then we've seen how, like, the spinal system is much like a piano. When there's a segment that isn't transferring information to the organ, or vice versa to the brain, we have a disruption in signal. Can't get any reception. When there's no reception, then the body compensates, because it's always trying to protect your structure. So now let's look at poor posture and lung function. The lungs are up here in the chest cavity, and well, we're going to take a look at something we see every day. Somebody opens up their cell phone, and here they are. Look at that. 2 to 3 decades of this postural imbalance. Muscles in the front become short and tight. The displacement of the head, remember that your head weighs 8% of your body weight, but it weighs more as it translates forward in front of the shoulders, as this diagram depicts. The more thoracic flexion, this is thoracic flexion, the rounding of the upper back, otherwise known as upper crust syndrome. In fact, René Callier, a medical doctor, the famous medical author and former director of the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at USC, says this: lung capacity can be decreased as much as 30% in these individuals with these postural imbalances. You can't even breathe effectively when your posture is out of alignment. I've assessed hundreds and hundreds of clients and patients' breathing. 95 to 98% of the patients and clients I've tested, whether they were athletes or not, had an inverted breathing pattern. So they were primarily breathing up into their chest and using their chest and their neck muscles to breathe with, which they're not designed to breathe with. Inverted breathing. So rather than filling up and letting the air go down so the diaphragm opens into the abdomen, so they're not breathing down into the abdominal area, they're breathing up. And that's what's going to create a dysfunctional breathing pattern. And that's learned over time. Now, there's a lot of reasons why people have disrupted breathing patterns. The causes are many, but we're just here to talk about the importance of oxygenation in using your lungs and what posture does, poor posture that is, does to lung function. So what is diaphragmatic breathing? Well, I want you to watch me first, and then I want you to try this on yourself. I'm going to place one hand on my chest and the other hand on my belly. Now, when I take a deep breath, see if you can notice which hand moves first. Now I'll do it from the side. Now, if you were watching closely, my lower hand moved first and my upper hand moved second. I drove the air down into the diaphragm. It expands into that area, creating a little bit of expansion of the lower ribs. And then my chest would lift second. That's a diaphragmatic breathing pattern. Now, here is an inverted breathing pattern. And from the side, that's an inverted breathing pattern. All right, I'm Brian Schwager, founder of the Wellness Movement Center. I share because I care. I always enjoy doing this. Look forward to part 3 coming up in a while. Talk about corrective strategies, what you can do to correct your posture. Read the article, and if you have questions, the contact information will follow this video. I appreciate your time, everyone. Be well, and bye for now.